Hello and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this week's tutorial, we're going to go through 3 different ways that you can recolor pre-existing watercolor textures to fit your needs. So if you are developing a brand and you want to include a watercolor texture and you've got a great texture that you love but it's the wrong color, I'll show you how to change it to any specific color that you'd like to use. So starting right off, I'm just going to create a new document. We're working in Photoshop, so I'm going to go File, New. And I'm just going to keep it as letter just to show you the watercolor texture in action, but I am going to change the color mode to RGB just to keep the colors more vibrant on screen for this video. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just go File, Place, and I'm going to select a pre-existing watercolor texture that I have. I have 2 watercolor texture kits and I'm using transparent PNGs, so they're not on a white background, they're all cut out really nicely, and I'll leave links to these kits if you'd like to check them out. I also have a Skillshare class on how to create watercolor textures and how to cut them out in Photoshop, so I'll leave a link to that as well. Okay, so I'm going to go into my volume 2. I've got 2 different kits right now, and I'm just going to grab an abstract, soft, transparent texture, and you can see I've got a whole bunch of them right here, all different colors and different shapes, and I think I'm going to grab this soft 6. So I'm going to hit Place and it's just going to drop right into my document, and next I'm going to grab my Hue Saturation slider. So this is the first option on recoloring, and this is probably the most well-known way to recolor a watercolor texture. So we're going to start with this and then we'll go into ones that are a little more unique. So I'm just going to click on this adjustment. If you don't have your adjustments panel right here, you can get to it by going Window, Adjustments, and it'll pop right open, and we're selecting this one right here, this Hue Saturation. And you can see right here in my layers palette, it added this adjustment layer, and it's going to be applied to any layer that's beneath it. If we want it only going into the layer that's directly beneath it, you want to right click on it and choose Create Clipping Mask. That'll make sure if you have other artwork that's underneath this texture, it will only be applied to the texture. So I'm going to click on this Hue node right here, and I'm just going to slide it, and as I do, you can see it's changing the color of my texture. So that's pretty cool. So if you don't have any needs for a specific color, but you need it in a different color family, this is a great method for changing that color. So pretty simple and straightforward. So that's method number 1. So method number 2, I'm going to bring in a different texture this time to show you those. So I'm just going to delete these layers just to show you that this can be used for any kind of watercolor texture that you have. So I'm going to go File, Place, and this time I'm going to select a texture from my original watercolor texture kit, and I'm going to choose another abstract texture. It's a transparent PNG, and you can see I've got a whole bunch of these that are a little more bold and vibrant than the second kit. The second kit's a little softer, and I'm going to grab this number 6 over here and hit Place. Okay. So as you can see, I've got a little bit of purple and a little bit of pink, but say that I wanted this watercolor texture to be a very specific shade of blue. So all I'm going to do is come down here and click this little icon, and this will create a new layer right above this. You can see it right here. The next thing you need to do is fill this entire layer with the color that you'd like to use. So a shortcut for filling an entire layer is to click on this background color right here. So I'm just going to click it once. I'm going to choose the blue. So if you already know the color build, you can enter it in here, CMYK or RGB, or you can just pick from over here. So I'm just going to pick a random blue and hit OK. So the keyboard shortcut to fill this entire layer with this color, make sure it's the back color right here. This is your foreground and this is your background. I'm going to hit Command Delete on a Mac or Control Backspace on a PC, and that will fill the entire layer full of blue. And since it's on the top layer, that's all I can see right now. Next, I'm going to right click on the layer and choose Create Clipping Mask. And when I do that, you can see it's only applied to the texture like we talked about earlier. The next thing I need to do to make sure that this changes the texture beneath to this blue color is I'm just going to toggle down this blend mode right here and choose color. And when you do that, you can see this entire texture takes on the blue. And if you want it to be a little more rich or lighter, you can use your adjustments. So I'm going to show you how I would adjust this. So I'm going to click on Levels right here. And this makes your darks darker and your lights lighter. It's kind of an extreme form of the contrast tool. So I'm just going to click and drag my dark node towards the center. You can see the darks are getting darker. And if I click on the white node and drag it to the left, my lights will get lighter. Now that's kind of washing out, so it's a little too extreme, but I just wanted to show you how that worked. Okay, so when you get it to a place you like, then you're good to go. But let's say, let me turn these off for a second. Let's say I just want a little bit of blue right here. I love all the colors I have, but I wanted to introduce a little bit of blue to this, and I wanted it to be a very specific shade of blue. So this is the most probably unique option or method out of the three that I'm showing. So let me delete these layers that we just did so I can show you how to do these. So what you're going to do, very similar to filling an entire layer with the blue color, this time we're going to paint the area that we'd like to use, but we need it to be on a new layer once again. So I'm going to come down here and click this little icon. I'm going to hit B on my keyboard for my brush tool, and over here are your brush settings. So I'm going to drop this down. I'm going to make sure that I have a very soft brush. This is important. You want your hardness to 0, and that's how you know you have a soft brush. So you can increase the size of your brush by hitting your close bracket key on your keyboard, or you can reduce the size by hitting the open bracket key on your keyboard. So I'm going to kind of come somewhere in the middle, and I'm just going to paint. I want to make sure blue is in my foreground since I'm using the brush tool. So I'm just going to click on this little icon right here and it'll switch them. You can also use the keyboard shortcut X. Just hit X on your keyboard and that'll switch them as well, or you can click this little arrow. So I want to make sure my blue is in my front, and then I can just paint the area that I'd like to use. Okay, and then just like we did before, we're going to right click on our color fill layer, choose Create Clipping Mask, and then come over to your blend mode and choose Color. And now you can see it took on that color, but it's a little bit harsh right here. So what we need to do is erase away the area that we don't need, and we're going to create a nice transition into the blue when we do that. So I'm going to hit E on my keyboard to activate my eraser tool, and you can edit the settings for your eraser the same way that you do for your brush. So up here, if you click this, we're going to make sure it's a very soft brush because we want a very nice smooth transition since this is a watercolor texture. And then we're just going to adjust our little node right here for our opacity of the brush. So we're going to start with a large opacity. So I've got mine set at 65. Because we want to remove a lot of this area of the blue on the watercolor texture. So I'm just going to click and move my mouse around to kind of start creating that transition. And every time you click, the opacity doubles. So the areas where you definitely don't want any blue, just go over them one more time. Okay, so that's looking pretty good, and now I just want it to be really soft transition right here, so I'm going to reduce my opacity once again. This time I'm going to bring it down to about 30, and then I'm just going to click and drag, and you can see how smooth that transition is becoming, and now I have just a little bit of subtle blue over here, which is maybe exactly what I need. Okay, so those are 3 very quick methods to alter the color of your watercolor texture to whatever you may need it to be. Once again, I'll leave links to both watercolor texture kits and the class that I have on creating a watercolor texture for graphic design, and if you've never tried Skillshare before, you can actually take the class for free using that link that's in the video description. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe. I release a new design tutorial every single Tuesday. And don't forget to head on over to my blog, every-tuesday.com, for even more design tutorials and a bunch of design freebies. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next week.